Hey everybody, welcome. It's Tripl-L to talk. Oh god, I did that wrong. Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L here to talk about My Hero Academia chapter 375. That feels so much better. It's kind of interesting. The rhythm's kind of in my head now. Anyway, hey guys, welcome. I'm recording this before going on the live stream, so I really hope this is going to be a 20-minute video. It kind of feels like a 20-minute video, but you never really know. I can already feel myself a little bit annoyed. What you need to know for this video before we get started is that I hope you're having a great day, and also I'm just coming off of a 13-day work week. I am very irritated. My irritability is up to the max. Just remember that I'm going to try to be very calm throughout the entire video, but you never really know what's going to slip out, and I might not be able to catch it depending on how I'm feeling. Anyway, just recall that, keep that in mind, keep that bias in mind. In terms of the general notes, like when I looked at the chapter, I was expecting to be a little bit annoyed. And mind you, like there are still some moments there where it's just like, eh. But there was also a few moments that are just like, all right, respect, respect, respect. And so I do want to open up this video with saying that, like, do you know what footnotes are in novels? Like, if you read Terry Pratchett, you've probably seen his footnotes, which I think are great. But footnotes, like that little note at the bottom of the page that just kind of explains something that occurred in the upper part of the page. Like, Hero Academia is probably one of the few manga where you will see footnotes in manga form very consistently. And I just ultimately want to say that Horikoshi should be appreciated for all his paranoia, because there are some lines in here, we're going to get into it, because like you got to give him the pass for it, even though we're going to like mildly criticize some of the lines because of like, there's purpose, right? There's purpose behind some of the things he does, but it kind of falls apart because like footnotes are already kind of a iffy matter because of how like they're really there to apply extra glue to something that is shaky, unless you're Terry Pratchett, in which case that's what we got here. Anyway, let's get into the chapter 375, Chaotic Confusion. Before I start that, actually, you know what I found really odd? I was reading the Viz Media translation, right? What I found really odd is because like Viz, the commenters there are sometimes like very they're very positive, and it was just really interesting just going through the quick little thing on Viz, just seeing like people saying they're confused, people pointing out that there was a flipping of the last two pages, which was interesting. And like when you look on the Viz Media translation, it's like, yeah, that's not the order that they were in the fan scans, which very odd and doesn't make sense on the Viz translation anyway. People saying it felt like there were a few pages that were missing and all that kind of stuff. Honestly, really odd. Some people forgot who the weather reporter was, which really just shows you like the attention span of the Hero Academia audience. Like, unfortunately for Horikoshi, he is fighting a big battle because his manga really requires that you remember little things, and if you don't really remember them, and I'm guilty of that too, things they spiral out of control. All right. Anyway, let's get into the chapter. Yeah, since we're going in here, let's also point out the thing about Tsuyu. You remember like last week or like last time, Tsuyu's headgear was in the Twice Clone's hand. What Horikoshi ultimately did here, I think, is extremely slimy. Not as slimy as the Kurogiri issue where he made it look like Kurogiri was in the prison. Not as slimy as that, but it's like, I know from the people on live stream were telling me that people thought that Tsuyu was in trouble because the headgear was in Toga's hands, or like Twice's hands, I don't know what you want to say, since the cliffhanger. And it's like, yeah, no. As you guys know, on this channel, we don't believe the cliffhangers. We assume it's the safest interpretation, and usually you'll be right. So it was good to see that here, just to like remember, this is a manga that needs to get those cliffhangers in. Remember, while cliffhangers might not be that great for us when we're like criticizing a chapter, if you are doing a weekly serial, I would recommend doing cliffhangers at all time. It's just like the economics of it. You really can't do well without having cliffhangers. If you don't have cliffhangers, you're not doing it correctly. So, props to Horikoshi. It's just unfortunate that in his case, he's very transparent. Or like not transparent. He's very predictable with his cliffhangers. It's like he artificially creates a cliffhanger because he knows he needs it, but then he just doesn't follow through, and it just leads to a pattern, right? Anyway, page 1. Is there anything important? We see the clouds are coming up over the island, which really just tells us the island's on the south side, but I think we already knew that. Not really that big of a deal. But yeah, the clouds coming. Doesn't matter anymore on this one because the main combatants for this battlefield move to another battlefield. Anyway, we see Toga coming up behind Tsuyu. We go into page 2. I do kind of like seeing the other heroes coming in there with Ochako. One thing that really bothers me here, and we're going to ignore the fact that Izuku could have broken one of one of Toga's legs to make this easier for everyone else and thereby make everything more efficient. We're going to ignore that because, like, you know, what else can we do? Every time I see Ochako get so close to Toga here, I'm thinking, like, Ochako, her knife is so close to your face. Why didn't you touch her? You touch her and you send her into the air. There's nothing in the air that would be able to obscure her. Anyway, one thing that I appreciated here is that you get this little panel where you have Ochako explaining the science of stealth when a high schooler uses it with loud gear. Like, Toga should be so encumbered by all the stuff she has on. But no, we're not going to talk about that. Anyway, her trick for concealer presence is basically a type of misdirection. Still must be complex and nuanced move. There's a limit to how many things the human body can do, but alright. So Ochako does make a really good point, and it's about as basic as 2 + 2 = 4, that being, yeah, if everyone has an eye on her, it's going to be really hard for her to disappear. So, you know, it's good that Ochako can employ basic logic. Now, one thing I kind of wanted to say about Ochako and Toga, like, really, if Hero Academia was a grounded series, and I'm talking like street level, this kind of stuff, and you know, like, you strip away the quirks, because the quirks actually aren't important here. With Ochako neglecting to use zero gravity, they aren't important here. What you're seeing here is a really street level fight between Ochako and Toga. Like, ultimately, like, the over-analysis of Toga's stealth is really the proof of that. If Hero Academia was a less sensational series about street level crimes like this, Ochako versus Toga would fit really, really well. It's just like, in the grand scheme of things, it's just not as bombastic, right? But this could be very gripping in a very intimate, you know, low scope series. It's just unfortunate, again, that Toga forces Ochako to say things like, let's talk about romance while on a battlefield. I will talk about that when we get there. So anyway, they go into the plan, keep on her with a sensory type hero and a group of at least 4 who can back each other up. This is really smart. I actually would have loved to see some team play. I think, you know, wasted opportunity here with too many battlefield. I think I could have done really well with, like, I would have enjoyed 2 pages, maybe 3 pages of just hardcore choreography of these girls. Are they actually all females? Oh, come on, Horikoshi. You could have slotted a guy in there. Like, this is one bias I don't really enjoy. I don't like the idea that only girls can fight girls. And in this case, like, having 4 girls against 1 girl, it's like, come on, man. You could have thrown other people in there. But alright, whatever. That's just like the natural bias for Shonen Jump. Anyway, I would have loved to see, you know, just maybe textless pages after the first page of just these girls one after the other going on Toga, making it look really hard. You don't have to add any story, you don't have to add any dialogue, you just need to show the choreography of it, and maybe make the hits really impactful. I think that would be really interesting. Of course, it's not in Horikoshi's best interest to do that, because then Toga loses. So he can't show like a concentrated sequence like that, because there's just no logical way to do it without having Toga lose. Because if you have Toga avoid all the heroes, she's like near invincible with like completely mortal speed. So that's why probably you don't want to do it. Also, it's because it's like the Toga Ochako fight, so it's not that important. You want to move Toga into another spot. Regardless, what it could have been really cool, but we're not really getting all the cool stuff. We have Gang Orca saying something concerning that, being that the Nomu does not have hyper regen. So when you hear that, your first thought should be like, did All For One play musical chairs with hyper regen and move it away? Did he shift it to another person? That could be very interesting. It'd be very strange for the Nomu to not have hyper regen, because it was a near high end, right? So like, I feel like all of them would have the hyper regens, but we'll have to see what happens in the future. What was the situation with the one Nomu that got eviscerated by those lasers? I have to look back. Okay, the villain's numbers are thinning. We get that information. From what it looks like, it's pretty much just the near high end and just like the upper tier villains that are still giving them trouble. So then we find out a very critical line: taking out these creatures that are still on this island is our mission. So that just really tells you that these are the people they want to isolate, and that is the That is the win condition for this particular group. We know by the end of the chapter they failed horrifically. Izuku should really have broken someone's leg, but hey, you know, here we are. Anyway, page 4 is the start of something interesting. And I really appreciate it because, like, in this kind of chaos, you need to set the parameters for what we're seeing here, and I think Horikoshi did a reasonably and good enough job here. We have the very good observation that the more people they lose, or the more people Toga loses, the slimmer her chances of avoiding capture become. Obviously, again, a very obvious statement, because Toga, as much as we would like to believe, it does not have a quirk that aids in stealth. It's just natural ability. We found out that she has 30 to 40 minutes of transformation time. And then we see her say that if she could drink it down, she gets numbers advantage, and then the Sandman's Parade would end on this isolated island. So I just want to make sure, because I remember we were talking about it on the stream, but when I read this, to me it sounds like Toga is saying that, yeah, I could beat them, but then I'm kind of stuck on the island. So, like, there's limits. Now, mind you, I don't think that if Toga loses a transformation, if she loses the transformation, I don't think she loses the twice clones. I don't think that happens, because I feel like also Toga can drink the blood, and then she can cancel the transformation and just kind of wait there. Either way, like, she can extend the 30 to 40 minutes. I feel the 30 to 40 minutes means, like, active transformation time. But if she goes 10 minutes and then she turns it off, she still has 30 minutes of the time stored up that she can use for later, right? So, like, it's pretty much just saying, yeah, no, there's just, if I can't leave here, I'm just not useful. Anyway, we then go into a narration that covers page 4 to 5 that talks about how Toga isn't actually a big planner type of thing. The big thing here is that Horikoshi kind of doubled down on the idea of her rancor. And then he said something, completed her transformation into a full-fledged villain. Now, I do have like a few little issues with the implications of this line. Like, you understand what he's saying, but it's also interesting that you're calling a murderer a full-fledged villain. Like, personally, I feel she was a full-fledged villain when she was cutting people's, like, necks open. If you're saying that a full-fledged villain is someone who who is driven by the big picture strategizing, then sure, I can see that. That's, like, definitely a card-holding villain. But I don't see that in Toga. She just seems like a very angry person. I don't like making a distinction between a full-fledged villain and a murderer who is capable of infiltrating a school, sedating one of the students, and no one is able to notice that. I don't like calling that anything less than a villain. That's a very, very interesting distinction to make. It works here because you're trying to hype her up that she has transcended or gone to a different level, but I disagree. This is just one of those points where it's like, I disagree with your rhetoric, I disagree with the positioning. I think this is a very stupid line, because she's still a very stupid girl. Like, nothing has really changed other than her having faith in her little buddy there, which I still think is kind of weird. If you look at the chapter, there's actually quite a bit of Toga propaganda, though. So we'll point it out as we go there. But yeah, you know, like, just a little disagreement with the author. I don't agree with that line. I don't agree with that distinction. I don't think it's a good idea to make these kind of distinctions and take away either from the villain label or the murderer label. I just don't think that's just not something we do. And now, mind you, like, what he's trying to say is that, you know, Toga has less doubts than before, but I feel like a villain that has humanity to them is much more scary than a simple black-white type villain. I think a villain that still has doubts is still a very compelling villain. The presence of doubts does not make them any less villainous, because it's like, now you're talking about, even though they have doubts, they still convinced themselves of something and went through with it, right? Anyway, also, when you have Ochako reaching out to her later, it kind of takes away from the transformation into a full-fledged villain, because, like, you know, Ochako's going to get through to her. I don't see any full-fledged villain here. Like, Ochako's about to de-escalate there. Like, Ochako, I'm going to actually go on some Ochako hype here, since, like, we're hyping up Toga. Ochako was able to de-escalate an entire crowd, alright? All she really needs to do is talk to Toga, which, for whatever reason, she didn't get the opportunity to do so before. But, yeah, like, Ochako right now has a really good track record on de-escalation. I kind of want to see her de-escalate All for One too, but we'll have to see if something amazing happens. Anyway, going back to page 4, Toga makes a comment about, did the heroes know about Jin's blood? I think at this point, it's pretty safe to say they did, because Hawk's comments kind of reinforce that. Anyway, we go into page 6, which I think was a really good moment for Suyu, where she's wondering, okay, whose blood is that? And then she goes through and breaks it. Now, this is going to get a little bit tricky because of what the author ultimately does here. All right, page 6 and 7 are ultimately very tricky and very stupid. So, what you have to appreciate here is, first, good on Suyu for being so attentive. Good on Toga for also being so tricky. Fair enough. That was actually really, really cool. The problem here, though, is in the grander scheme of things. Okay, Horikoshi. So we're now playing a game where we have microdevices and chemicals, and All for One is able to get all these stuff from his backyard cave. I'm assuming that the explanation for all this is just either the doctor left a lot of supplies for All for One, or Skeptic made a lot of supplies for All for One. Either way, what's really important here is to ask why. When this happens, it's like, author, why are we going so out of our way for a chemical pheromone that attracts Nomu? And I'm calling it a pheromone because, like, if it smells like a pheromone, if it looks like a pheromone, it's probably a pheromone. Why are we going out of our way to use chemical warfare now? We know that the Nomu respond to radio waves. We know they respond to Shigaraki All for One. Why not just a simple button that says, beep, hey, hit the person Toga's attacking, or the person attacking Toga? You know, why not? Why not just go into technology? Why do we have to go this other level? If you're going to have like a little vial with false blood, why not have some acid? Let's burn this girl's tongue. Let's like really make her regret it, you know. Let's make her cry. Let's make, maybe even kill a hero. Maybe even like burn a hole in her stomach. I don't know, like options. Well, the bigger thing to really take away from this though is that on a meta level, if you ever come to a point where you're saying like, oh yeah, you know, that could happen, but it just doesn't make sense. If you're looking at a logistical issue, you're wondering like the logistics just don't work out, you really should probably get rid of that idea, because the author, what he's doing is showing that he's 100% willing to pull out stupid technology out of his back just to make something work out. Like, he will completely neglect completely normal ways of doing things, like, hey, how about a second recorder? Or hey, how about a recorder that you press a button, it's a very small recorder, it emits a very loud signal for someone to hear, or, you know, like a little thing that sends out radio waves that it has commands and all that kind of stuff. You know, at this point, there's no real reason to see a logistical issue and say it's impossible because of a logistical issue. Because like right now, the author is showing he's 100% willing to just pull out random things if it makes the story work. Even though in this case, I don't think there was any need for this kind of maneuver. Anyway, it's just setting the stage for what to expect. Just get ready for the author pulling out just random innovations for whatever reason. Anyway, we go into page 7 where we see that Froppy got attacked by the Nomu, and then we see like the strangest thing in the world, right? So one of the commenters, Miguel, was saying that, oh, maybe she turned into Suyu because she wanted to use Suyu's tongue. There is no reason for her to use Suyu's tongue in this situation. It makes absolutely no sense for her to be using Suyu's tongue, because the blood that she ultimately ingested was on her person. So she was going to get the blood, she put it in her mouth, there. Why did she turn into Suyu? Because if you think about it, what happens here is that Suyu gets attacked, Toga is relatively nearby, and also, mind you, Suyu only gets attacked once. Only one time. So I want to know how that Nomu didn't attack more times, because Toga was right next to Suyu. Why didn't the attack continue? Because like I see this thing on Suyu's tongue. It should be continuously tracking the Nomu, or like the Nomu should be continuously tracking it. If you're gonna say like it's a chemical that attracts Nomu, but I don't see it. It's only one attack. That's pretty stupid. Anyway, when you see the scene with Toga on top of Suyu, it's like, okay, Toga licked Suyu's blood. She turned into Suyu. Why? This all happened in an instant. Why did you do this? Also, she ripped the goggles off of Suyu's head. Why? Why did you do this? Now this one, the reason she has the goggles in her hand, the reason that this attack happens, and Toga is able to slip this thing off in the time that Ochako says floppy, it's because he had to justify why the goggles were in twice his hand in the previous chapter. That's the only reason that happens, and it's really weird because the logistics don't make sense. Now, why does she turn into Tsuyu? Well, aside from just a sick fascination with Tsuyu, and maybe the desire to draw two Tsuyus on top of each other, it might be this line where Ochako has, I have to make an instant decision. Now, here's the thing. Why does Ochako have to make an instant decision? What it seems to be implying is that Toga transformed into Tsuyu to buy herself time. But here's the thing. Ochako is a non-threat. There are no ways to properly describe how much Ochako cannot do in this situation. Ochako isn't a high-speed mover. Ochako isn't someone where 1 second will make all of a difference when she is far away from a person. Her wires are so slow that Twice can just like, wait, there we go. He can just flick it away. So you have to make an instant decision, but you don't have any instantaneous movement options. So there's no real reason to have this. This whole sequence of her turning into Tsuyu is exceedingly wasted because it's not like Ochako was right next to the situation. Everything about this scene says Ochako was too far away to do anything of value. Also, very easy to see who is the hurt person in this situation. Now, mind you, that I have to make an instant decision might also be from Toga. I can't tell. Because like that instant decision does run really well from, to make sure that Jin's parade gets to March without fail, I have to make an instant decision. That makes sense. But it's then again, if you take away the idea that Ochako's saying I have to make an instant decision, it's like, why did you turn into Tsuyu? There is nothing of value in turning into Tsuyu other than like taking off a bucket list item. Now, yet another alternative would be that Toga transformed into Tsuyu to save Tsuyu, or like in general tried to save Tsuyu. Now, I don't fully understand that either, because Toga is more agile than Tsuyu by everything we've seen, or like agile enough that she could go in there after the attack and get her. Like the fact that Tsuyu is intact must be because either Tsuyu avoided it or Toga saved Tsuyu. Now, in the event that Toga saved Tsuyu, that's probably the only way that you can maybe make the whole transformation work out. Now, see, I've given you many options here and how you can interpret this. This is still a very odd scene. The author did not give enough context to properly understand what's going on here. And of the options, Toga saving Tsuyu from the attack, like preventing her from getting critical damage, might be the only thing that really makes sense, all things considered. Anyway, you then have like another just terrible line here with the author saying the Rancor brought about a miracle. I don't think so. I don't think that Rancor brought about a miracle. It was pretty much her faith. Her faith in Spinner brought about a miracle. Like, mind you, and it's not even her. It's not even her. She didn't even do anything of value. It's Spinner. It's Spinner's desperation that brought about a miracle. So, like, the framing of, like, that Rancor brought about a miracle, that's just a hype tool for Toga. It doesn't really work. Pretty lame. It's just, again, consistently there's just a hype tool for Toga, and they just want to like make it seem like, oh, this was such a big deal, but I don't buy it. I don't see it in this particular situation. Nothing Toga did brought about a miracle. What really just happened was that Spinner came through, regardless of Toga's activities. Actually, that's the best way to do it. Toga could do anything and that portal will still appear there. Maybe the best decision was not turning into Twice too soon, but that's not really, don't really care. That's not really miracle worthy. Then we see Kurogiri show up. Kurogiri did go with Present Mike, so we don't see Present Mike in the situation. I just, whatever. Kurogiri is asking Toga what does she want to do. And this is kind of important because Toga was a little bit of a... she wasn't fully decided, but like, I don't know, like Horikoshi's saying she's a full-fledged villain now, but like she wasn't fully decided. Initially she was doing things because like they're already gone too far, and it's like, well, Toga was already a murderer, so like she went too far like a very long time ago. Anyway, this is the face of Ochako realizing that Izuku should have broken her legs. We go down and we have Toga pretty much saying that she wants to slaughter the heroes, starting with Hawks. We go into an embarrassing page for Ochako where she throws her whips towards them. and the Twices just kind of like backhand the whips. It's actually pretty funny. That's how pathetic those whips are. And then we have the great line of, "We still haven't had our chat about romance," and it's like, I understand now. I understand why she's doing it. It's because like Toga's rhetoric is all about romance, but it's also pretty embarrassing to have to be saying this out loud across the battlefield. Why weren't you talking about romance while the battle was going on, right? Like you should have been trying to at least stop her from early on. Anyway, we see the surprise face on Toga, and she says, "I wish we could have." And it's like, I don't, Toga, you also said that you were done with them. So like, did you really wish? But mind you, like, it just says that the previous stuff about her being done with Ochako and them was pretty much bunk. If you believe that Toga saved Tsuyu, then you understand that the whole thing about Toga hating them and not loving them anymore was bunk, which makes sense because it's Toga. Yeah, like really the interpretation that Toga saved Tsuyu from a critical hit is probably very charitable and does help her more than it hurts her character. Anyway, we go in now into real time. We have left the flashbacks. Twice has appeared. We see the epic footnote that it's Toga with Jin's blood. She had some saved up. "When I infiltrated the Liberation Army, I was sure to eliminate every last sample." So what that says is that Hawks knew about that transformation ability, because he's saying he eliminated every last sample when he was still there. All right, so he knew about it. Even the traces after the battle. Was this Dobby's doing? Okay, so there's, again, celebrate the author because he is a gift to the world, because he's one of the few authors that does this level of footnotes. I keep on saying cliff notes, but it's footnotes. But here's the trouble with it. This line characterizes Hawks as being very effective. But what do you mean when he says even the traces after the battle? This is actually the very tricky line, because it implies a few things. One, Hawks was removed from that battlefield by Tokoyami. There is a lot of time that was unaccounted for. This shouldn't even be a question. It's like, was this Dobby's doing? No. Like, when did he return to eliminate the samples? Because he was injured. He was so injured. What did they say about Hawks? They barely saved him or something like that. Was that for Hawks? Anyway, point is, like, he was super injured. So when did he come back? If he came back after Tokoyami saved him and before he goes to Central Hospital, there's still probably an hour or two that's unaccounted for. Because they had to get away from the Makia. All that Makia time. All the time that Toga was there slicing up people's necks. That's unaccounted for. It's not very hard to imagine Dobby taking the blood in the immediate moments after Twice dies, pretty much. So this is like a little bit of the problem here. The logistics don't really work out. So the acknowledgement that should have occurred here was, did they take the blood in the few hours when I couldn't be there? In the few hours, or like in the few moments after I killed Twice and retreated? If he adds in that line, then the footnote is good. But this line overlooks that there was a good amount of time where Hawks wasn't there to take care of everything. So the reason that matters is because given the level of preparation they're saying that Hawks had, you now have to open up scrutiny to the entire thing and say, like, okay, if Hawks was this prepared and he was able to think about this much, then why wasn't he able to think about the very critical moments where Dobby would have probably picked up Twice's blood immediately after the kill? So that's like the catch-22 of going this far and adding competency to a character. You end up having to say, like, okay, you were so competent here, but why did you fall short with the very glaring weakness in this assumption? And this is kind of and then just on a broader note, this is kind of the problem that occurs when you add competency after the fact. At this point, we know that the heroes were competent enough to know that Toga had a trick up her sleeve, and now we're seeing like the one weak assumption here was that Hawks eliminated everything after the battle. Him being able to say, was this Dobby's doing, is just like showing that, oh, Hawks is clever enough to figure that out, but he should have figured that would have happened ahead of time. There should have been a contingency of Toga might have gotten Twice's blood at this very critical moment, so we need to prioritize killing her. If we prioritize killing her, Hawk style, then Izuku does not leave that battlefield when he still has Toga grabbed by Black Whip. The fact that Toga was on her butt when Black Whip had her that would have been the critical moment. That would have been the moment to kill her. So like you kind of see that there is a cause and effect chain happening here. Okay, we go to page 12 and 13, and we see She-Mage. She-Mage is a really great design, so I think She-Mage is going to have at least one moment in the upcoming battle on this battlefield. So that'll be pretty cool to see, I think. Okay, now I'm going at page 14 and 15. Viz Media has the wrong one, so like I'm just reading page 15 on Viz Media. And so what we see on this page is that Tsuyu grabs Ochako, and she launches her towards the portal. And then she's talking about the feelings you've locked up inside. There's only one set of feelings that she's locked up inside, and those are of Izuku. So we'll see where this goes. I'm still waiting for Ochako to say, like, after this fight is over, I'm going to tell Izuku my true feelings. I'm ready for it. Anyway, the good thing about this, though, is that Ochako most likely activates her zero gravity, and she pulls Tsuyu through. So the Tsuyu-Ochako train still continues. Tsuyu pulls in Ochako, and we have Ochako falling into the next battlefield. Now, we have something pretty interesting here in the way that the faces are framed. We have Dobby looking at Endeavor, Endeavor looking at Dobby. We have All For One looking at Hawks, and Hawks looking at All For One. And we have Ochako right in the middle. Now, this makes it look like Ochako is going to be pivotal to those other fights. But honestly, like she kind of has her hands full with Twice. So she kind of needs to go and deal with that. Now, we got a Horikoshiism. And if you remember last chapter, I mentioned that this girl was going to be used to be the rallying cry for the heroes, to show that the heroes of the world hadn't given up. Like, she would be used again, right? Because she ultimately became a plot device. What was actually very surprising was that Horikoshi used her, or he invoked her image very quickly. Now, what is Horikoshi trying to say by having this character talking, right? Or like by invoking this character's image? The exact image that he invokes is the one that talked about the flap of a butterfly's wings. So that's where that face comes from. But the idea that she's probably he's probably invoking is the line that went, "I stand firmly opposed to the government's decision, no, the world's decision to pander to All For One." And then she's maybe talking about, like, she might also be like that image might also be referring about, like, is it the face of superpowered society to descend into chaos or something like that. What her image being invoked there is really there to say, I think, is just, if it's the butterfly, it's there to say that, you know, one action will lead into like way more chaos, or like one action leads into like many other scenarios. Or she's just saying that people will just not roll over for All For One. It depends on which interpretation you take. Right now, I would say, given the panel that was taken, is the one that was associated with descending into utter chaos. It might be that panel, but given that Horikoshi blotted out the words for it, probably means he just wants to invoke her image as a symbol of people that will continue defying All For One, no matter how bad this looks. Either way, you know, just keep your mind open for either one. The fact of the matter is, you can't say that there isn't a message here because Horikoshi went out of his way to include this girl. Page 15 is Toga saying, Ochako saying, "I ain't losing sight of you, not again." I'm pretty sure she's gonna lose sight of Twice at some point there, but her shot there looks very Izuku-esque, which I think is really, really neat. Good for her. Now, people were saying that, some people on the live stream were saying, like, maybe Toga is going to be able to identify, or sorry, not, I keep saying Toga, maybe Ochako is going to be able to identify Toga in the crowd Twice. And I think that could be relatively neat, honestly. Anyway, guys, that's it for me. You know, the worst parts of the chapter, they're just like, a lot of it is just asking why. Why, Horikoshi? Why? Why did you feel the need to do this? It's so overcomplicated. But it's just setting a precedent for like the upcoming chapters. I don't think it was hard to read. What I find really curious is like why exactly people feel that there were missing pages. Like, I don't see anything that's really missing here. And like the things that we saw, like everything that I thought was questionable, I kind of pointed it out as we went. Anyway, guys, let me know what you thought down below. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.